It's Wednesday, November 22nd, 2014, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by Jeff Otto, Senior Marketing Manager at Salesforce.com, to lead a talk on behavioral economics, a really cool topic for product managers. So just let me allow you to briefly explain the format. Along the bottom of your screen, you might be seeing some people join a little bit later. Those are other mentors and mentees currently participating in session 2 of the Product Mentor program. Right now, we're joined by our mentor, the person who will be leading the talk, Jeff. And I'm the moderator, Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating today. So as you have questions, and as this is a live stream, submit them to our Google Moderator channel, and you can get there very easily by going to theproductmentor.com/live and post it to the Google Moderator channel there. As the questions come in, I'll be jumping in and interrupting Jeff and getting you your answers to your questions in a fairly real time or near real time. But with all that said, let me hand it over to Jeff to get started in talking about behavioral economics. Jeff?
Great, thanks, Jeremy. So first, I just want to thank you for hosting this forum. It's a phenomenal platform for connecting with other product managers, marketers, designers. Really enjoy it. So I'm going to flip over to screen share here so everybody can see the presentation deck. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about one of the foundational aspects of behavioral economics, which is the chemicals in our brain and how they affect decisions. Probably not what you expect, but a few of these chemicals are really the foundation blocks of behavioral economics. So according to our friends at Google Search, behavioral economics is a method of economic analysis that applies physiological insights into human behavior to explain decision-making. So what does that mean in simple terms, and why is it relevant to product design and product marketing? In order to answer these questions, I need a couple minutes to lay the groundwork, and the first step is a comparison between behavioral economics and conventional economics. So first up, conventional economics. The way to think about this, the history in conventional economics has been around for a while, and one of the core tenets behind it is that human decision-making processes are based on choices that result in the most optimal level of benefit for the individual. Essentially, that we're all little proficient economic robots that know what makes us happy, and we make choices that maximize that happiness. So, for example, in a conventional economics world, a sober blackjack player in Vegas knows that to ask the dealer for another card when he or she is sitting on an 11, because the probability of pulling a face card or a 10 is high. And this is the rational thing to do to get 21 and win the bet. But what about the stock market? About 40 years ago is when behavioral economics started getting headlines. Economists started asking hard questions, such as, if people are so rational, why do they follow the herd and buy when the market is inflated and sell when the market is depressed? Best-selling book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, written by Burton Malkiel in 1973, summed it up well, where he said human beings, when the market's hot, they're overconfident that it will continue to go up. And they follow the herd during both bull and bear markets. We also have an unbelievably strong psychological bias to avoid losses. And so the combination of these factors cause us to act irrationally and time the stock market very poorly. But it turns out the ideas behind rational economic behavior that are the underlying theme in behavioral economics, they've been around for a long time. The father of conventional economics, Adam Smith, has recently been credited for his foundational work in behavioral economics. Professor Nava Ashraf of Harvard Business School did a deep dive on one of Smith's books, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. This book has been around since 1759, and she was able to relate and show how closely the virtues Adam Smith wrote about 250 years ago relate to the emerging field of behavioral economics today. So to quote her, Smith believed that much of human behavior was under the influence of the passions, emotions such as fear and anger, drives such as hunger and sex. But these passions were moderated by an internal voice of reason, which he called the impartial spectator. So although these ideas have been around for some time, it's modern psychology and neuroscience that's brought some clarity to what's actually going on in our heads. So deep in our brains, there are chemicals that are quietly pulling the strings and influencing our behavior. I'm not referring to our higher brain, the neocortex. What I'm talking about are older regions of the brain, deep down in our brain, that control our emotions and our instincts. So today, we're going to talk about 4 of these chemicals, and we're going to relate each of them back to specific product design and product marketing examples that you can take with you from this live stream. I did want to say a quick caveat that this is not an exhaustive list, and I'm by no means a neuroscientist. There are many more chemicals and complexities in the interactions of these chemicals that I'm not going to be able to cover today. So consider this a high-level primer on a handful of chemicals that I feel are most relevant to us, product people, in today's social and mobile world. So, the 4 chemicals.
Just a reminder for those who are just joining us right now, you can be submitting your questions, and we'll be passing them along to Jeff at theproductmentor.com/live. On the bottom of the page, you'll see a Google Moderator channel. Just post them right there, and we'll pass them right along. Thanks. Back to you, Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so the 4 chemicals we're going to cover today are dopamine, which I'll call brain candy, serotonin, which we'll refer to as the power molecule, oxytocin, aka love and trust molecule, and cortisol, which is otherwise known as the stress hormone. And so why is this relevant to you, product managers, designers, marketers? Understanding these chemicals and how they influence behavior will help all of you product designers and product managers build better user experiences that delight the market. And it will help us product marketers determine how to set prices to increase conversions, influence the amount prospects pay for our services, even the quantity that they buy. But I will say a quick warning, this is powerful stuff, and preying upon people's dopamine incentive system can be evil if done for the wrong reasons. Dopamine, for example, is, after all, the same chemical that is released in the brain when human beings ingest nicotine, alcohol, or cocaine. And one last thing before we dive in, you're going to see this little takeaway bag on some of the slides. With this little icon, what I'm trying to signal are key learning points in today's talk. I'll also do a recap at the end of the live stream to do a refresher on the key takeaways. So, okay, first, let's drill in more on dopamine. Dopamine motivates persistence in the pursuit of things that meet our needs. It is released when we achieve a task, but I think more importantly, it's released before we've completed a task as an incentive for us to get across the goal line. Let's explore a practical example of how to trigger dopamine. Note the little takeaway bag in the top corner. Udemy is a marketplace of online courses. Here's a great example of their email nurture campaign that they leverage to give you a little shot of dopamine for accomplishing part of a goal. In this case, the goal is completing an online short course. The key is that they congratulate you and they encourage you to keep going. You can see some of the yellow highlights in there that show how they're specifically calling out. This generates a feeling of accomplishment, which triggers the release of dopamine in our brain. The positive feeling you experience reinforces your desire to finish the course. In fact, you actually may develop a craving to finish the course so you can get another hit of dopamine. Now, one of the risks that I discussed earlier is that this is highly addictive and habit-forming. If you want to have a good laugh, I love South Park. I'm using a few South Park examples in this live stream. Check out the recent episode called Freemium Isn't Free, which is all about forming dopamine addictions in mobile gaming. So next up, serotonin, or as I call it previously, the power molecule. In a amusing book entitled You're Too Kind, The History of Flattery, authored Richard Stengel references a study by UCLA in which a professor, Michael McGuire, showed that dominant or alpha males had twice the level of serotonin in their blood as subordinate males. What's really interesting about the study is that all it took to reduce the level of serotonin was to isolate dominant males from their peers. It was the peers' subordinate behavior that triggered the release of serotonin. In Netflix original series House of Cards, Kevin Spacey is a Machiavellian social and political climber named Frank Underwood. In the show, he's both alpha male and subordinate, depending on his environment. His lust for power is a playbook serotonin addiction. So here's a practical takeaway. Badges and rewards for the completion of key tasks or business milestones are actually a big deal at my company. The rewards are public, and that's key to this working. They're visible to the whole company, and I'll tell you, it does work. I was having a chat with a senior product marketer at our firm who joked with me that as much as she knew the psychology behind it, she was still susceptible to it and very proud when she achieved what we call a top influencer status. This reward system drives healthy competition internally among sales teams, but another way to capture it is to work with externally with your brand's top influencers to create a sense of community status. Again, another South Park reference. This is one of my favorite episodes. Many of you may have seen it, and it's all about Facebook. In this scene, Stan Marsh's dad walks down the hall to his son's room one morning and asks him why Facebook says they're no longer friends. Obviously, the irony of the father using the internet and an application like Facebook to understand why his son and him are no longer friends. So there's been volumes written about the psychology of Facebook, and we're not going to dive deep into that today. But in addition to serotonin, another chemical that is at the core of Facebook is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the feeling of togetherness or love. It drives us to generosity. It helps us open up and be vulnerable. And it allows us to feel belonging. It can induce feelings of optimism, self-esteem, and it builds trust. Amazingly, not only the giver and receiver of kindness get a hit of oxytocin, but even witnesses get a hit. So the effect of oxytocin is instantaneous trust building, and it is increasingly being seen as something that can help people overcome their social inhibitions and fears. So how do we apply it to our products? So biologically, we are wired to work together. We get oxytocin rewards when we take care of one another. Giving and receiving trust, love, and loyalty gives us these chemicals. They make us feel security and they grease the social machine. So to take advantage of these things, build user and customer communities that make it easy for the community to share and like what each other is contributing. All right, so we're on to the fourth chemical today. And this chemical is the only bad one in the group, technically. Cortisol, stress hormone. Before adrenaline, this is our body's first response to a fight or flight situation. It is trying to get us to identify real or imagined danger. Now, sadly, our brain's ancient early warning system, which controls the release of cortisol, doesn't understand that today we work in offices and are no longer on the savannah running for our lives. It doesn't realize that we're not in real danger when we're late on a deliverable or late to a meeting with our boss. We feel stress when we feel unsupported. We are strong creatures, though, and will adapt to an unhealthy work culture, a lack of trust in colleagues, layoffs, an angry boss, but these things will impact our health negatively. Some studies have shown that cortisol increases blood pressure, it messes up glucose levels, it even shuts down the immune system. Cortisol will even inhibit the release of oxytocin and all the positive benefits that we were just talking about. Most interestingly, cortisol impedes cognitive ability. So in other words, it blocks our ability to think clearly. The practical takeaway here is that we want to reduce the friction in our user experiences and in our buyers' decision-making process. Reduce stress and make buying and using your applications as effortless as possible. So here's a quick story. When faced with too many options, we're not able to evaluate them all effectively. The concept is known as cognitive load. And you may have noticed this if you ever sat down in an old school neighborhood diner that's got 1,000 items on the menu and you struggle to decide what to order. There is a famous jam study that a professor, Sheena Iyengar at Columbia University, conducted back in '95. Her team set up a booth at a California gourmet grocery store. During one period, they would stock this booth with 24 types of Wilkinson & Son jams. And during another period, they would reduce the selection down to just 6 choices of jam. So what do you think happened? What's interesting is that 60% of customers were drawn to the sample that had more choices, that had the 24 choices, versus only 40% with the smaller 6 jam selection. But 30%, or 10 times the number, bought from the 6 jam selection than the alternative. 10x the conversion rate really shows the impact of cognitive load on the decision-making process. With behavioral economics, there's a theory called cognitive laziness, which proposes that people use a variety of techniques to reduce the effort of making decisions. So what's really interesting about the Columbia University study is that consumers are attracted to the broader variety, but when it comes to paying, when it comes to the decision to buy, they freeze up. They prefer fewer decisions. They like their decisions made for them. And this is a key finding as it pertains to getting conversions to paying customer. So what can we learn from this? A study by Nelson Cohen found the magical number is 4 when it comes to short-term memory. So product managers and marketers, keep the pricing simple and you'll increase conversions. On the screen is an example from Optimizely as of, I think I took this screenshot in August 2014. Notice, only 4 pricing options. And not only that, they're defaulting my decision to buying 1 year up front for a 10% discount. You can see that right in the middle of the screen highlighted. They're also defaulting me to the most expensive enterprise option, which is a bit of price anchoring as well. This is a really great example of how to reduce friction in purchasing decisions. Okay, so if you take anything away from the live stream, I would screenshot this table. It is a recap of the key takeaways. We talked a little bit about dopamine. Again, this is brain candy. Some practical ways to trigger it using an email nurture campaign example from Udemy. We talked about serotonin, the power molecule, and how public awards, badges, and status can trigger it. We talked about oxytocin, the love and trust builder, and how you should let your user community share and like what each other contributes to create trust and brand loyalty. And then finally, we talked about cortisol, the stress hormone. To avoid it, reduce friction in decision making, opt in your users, and limit purchasing decisions to 4 options. So there's quite a bit to go deeper onto any of these topics. This slide summarizes the work cited in today's live stream. I particularly recommend, if you're interested more in the 4 chemicals discussed, read Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. It's number 4 on the screen, and just a phenomenal book about how these chemicals interact with one another. A great storyteller. And with that, that wraps up our content.
Cool. So we don't, right now, Jeff, we don't have a lot of questions from the moderator channel, but I think I did have one. Can you talk a little bit about how this has kind of come into play kind of in your day-to-day workings?
Yeah, well, I tell you...
If you could switch back to the video, that would be great. Yeah,
and the how it's applied, to my day-to-day, I think in particular the oxytocin learnings, right? How do you build brand loyalty? How do you build a connection? Almost making your customers feel like they're part of the family, and it's something that we focus on very heavily at my company. So we do that through events that we host ourselves as opposed to doing third-party events. We do that through our culture and being kind of more of that tech-friendly culture, and it works. And we have amazing customers, and they're great advocates.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen a take like this before. I think this is it was a short discussion, but I think you had some really great points. I think definitely something I'll be passing along to a lot of my folks as well. So with that said, as always, for everyone who's joining us, the presentation that Jeff just gave will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And again, thank you, Jeff, Senior Marketing Manager at Salesforce.com, for today's discussion on behavioral economics. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today. We had a really good crowd on the live stream as well. So again, thank you for joining us and the product mentor today. If you're interested in being a mentor, just like Jeff, then please go to theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And if you're looking to fill a great product job with a great product person, we have a free job board just for connecting product people with great product jobs. And you can take advantage of that at theproductjobs.com. And that's all for today. See you guys all next time. Bye.